In the world of fashion dolls, there's clear and set labels for their individual legacies and impact. Barbie was the innovator and still that girl over 60 years later. Polly Pocket had the most chewable clothing ever made. American Girl had a parent-approved image, but were nonetheless very bougie. My Scene was Barbie's new millennium cousin, but New Yorkified. Bratz were the game changers and showed Barbie that for the first time in her career, she had some competition. Moxie Girls were their little sisters. Liv dolls were the other girls, I guess. But what would happen if you blended the glamorous it girl vibes of fashion dolls with the terrifying horror genre? This is where Monster High came in. They were freaky, but fabulous. Following the influence of Tim Burton movies and Lady Gaga, the concept of this doll line focused on the daughters of Universal monsters and mythical creatures in high school. Within the general doll community, Monster High is one of the most beloved brands. With being branded in the media as goth Barbies, they were known for their edgy sense of style and ties with scary media. Unsurprisingly, they were met with plenty of controversy, which you could say made them even more appealing. And currently, they're joined along with Barbie and Bratz as the latest doll line to be culturally impactful, at least for now. No other dolls in the toy aisle look like these girls. They are presumably well prepared to stand out and loved every moment of it. We're gonna look into the history and legacy of Monster High. So now, let's get started. In order to understand how a line of fashion dolls like Monster High emerged, we need to understand how alternative styles became popular. Around the 1980s, with the popularity of punk rock, and the 1990s with grunge music, styles that were formerly considered underground were becoming widely known in the general public. MTV helped bring the sound and aesthetic of alternative rock. And in Hollywood, movies like The Crow and The Craft were credited for platforming the goth subculture. In the 2000s, performers like Avril Lavigne, Amy Lee of Evanescence, and Hayley Williams of Paramore were noted for their edgy sense of style and were especially popular with teenage girls. Since fashion dolls typically reflect popular trends, they would occasionally put out lines that were inspired by different subcultures. For instance, the Bratz Pretty and Punk line centered on punk aesthetics, and the Midnight Dance line were inspired by goth fashion. Even Barbie felt pretty edgy from time to time, but still, there wasn't an individual doll line that was centered on alternative styles. In 2007, toy designer Garrett Sander created a concept for a doll line that mixed trendy styles with horror elements. Mattel filed the trademark Monster High in response to girls' interest in fashions with dark aesthetics. The retail store Hot Topic was especially popular during this time, and had edgy clothing and accessories being accessible to anyone. Some of the biggest pop singers of the time were known for regularly wearing over-the-top costumes. And with the influence of Harry Potter, concepts of mythical-based schools were kind of a thing. And something like this is a good model for a brand. You can vicariously escape those classrooms that have needlessly loud fluorescent lights. Monster High was launched in 2010, and it's centered on 4 characters all having general nice girl personalities, but fashion-wise, all having different aesthetics, with roots in goth, punk, and Harajuku styles. The arguable lead of the brand is Frankie Stein, who is the daughter of Frankenstein and his bride. Her style appears to be preppy, mixed in with a few emo inspirations. Draculaura is the daughter of Dracula, and following the Cullen tradition, she is a vegetarian vampire because this line can't cause any more controversy. Given the time period of when the novel Dracula was written, her looks take some nods from the Victorian era. Claudine Wolfe is a werewolf, with her general style taking notes from the punk subculture, as well as wearing lots of faux fur. Laguna Blue is a sea monster and has a surfer/mermaid core aesthetic. Cleo Denial is the daughter of a mummy pharaoh, and given her background in royalty, she acts as a designated mean girl and has a glamour-focused style. Ghoulia Yelps was introduced as a side character, but would later join the main group. She's a zombie with a style that is reminiscent of the scene subculture with some retro influences. If I'm gonna be real, I have to note that the looks for these dolls were based on Mattel's rival, Bratz, with their big heads, small body designs, and edgy sense of style. But to be fair, this wouldn't be the first time that Mattel would do this. These dolls are also known for being fully articulated, making them fun to pose and able to stand on their own feet. There was also an intrinsic humor around this doll line, particularly with the haunted-themed puns and some gags with their accessories and animal friends. Like Laguna has a pet piranha, that is so fitting. And every decision made seemed to have worked because in just 3 years of its release, Monster High became a billion-dollar brand. Its success even contributed to Barbie's decline in sales during the early 2010s. Allegedly. Much like Barbie, Monster High promoted itself using multimedia marketing. For instance, they had their own book series, which may or may not be canon. It depends on who you ask. They also had their own branded music. If you're into Britney Spears' Blackout and Lady Gaga's first 4 albums, there's something you can add to your playlist. Fright Song would serve as the brand's main theme and would be heard in a lot of their commercials, which is genius. Like, how can you not get hyped when listening to this? But all of their songs are a great way to get into a Halloween spirit. You see what I did there? Monster High even had an official Tumblr page when the site was probably at its best. It's pretty rare for corporations to be on Tumblr, so I'll give Mattel some points for that. Short webisodes were used to promote the dolls and created more storylines and character development for the fans to get into. Not to mention, there were 8 Monster High films released from 2010 to 2015. And considering how large the fan base for these dolls are, I'm surprised there weren't a collection of memes from these movies like how Barbie had, but I speculate that they'll come around in the distant future. And naturally, when something gets popular, everyone else will try to emulate it. MJ launched the Bratzilla's dolls in 2012. This doll line was focused on witches, but I think we can see what they were trying to do. But this line didn't catch on and was discontinued a year later. With Monster High being so popular, it didn't take long for them to meet any fashion doll's mortal enemy, concerned parents. It's interesting how they've been obsessed with fashion dolls since at least 1959. Their criticisms were expected. They didn't like their clothes and how they focused on looks, they're bad role models, we all know it at this point. But because the central focus of Monster High is embracing all things spooky and supernatural, some parents really didn't like that as well. They probably didn't approve of Dracula's coffin bed, but some criticisms were criticized for being sexist, with the argument that if a toy line geared towards boys had horror themes, no one would bat an eye. And I can't argue against that. Stuff like this happens throughout all forms of media. For instance, properties like Fast and the Furious and Transformers didn't get a fraction of the hate, media attention, and academic analysis that Twilight had, is all I'm saying. But there really is no such thing as bad publicity. Mattel was having fun with the brand's success, and we saw more dolls representing different fantasy characters. There were dolls based on the abominable snowman, banshees, dragons, genies, gargoyles, etc. But it seemed that as the line continued on, there was less of a focus on classic horror characters, and instead was moving towards making fashion dolls from mythology. And I suppose the creators wanted to focus more on this concept, since in 2013, there was the launch of the companion line Ever After High, which was inspired by fairy tales and supposedly Once Upon a Time. Around 2014, as we started to see new characters, they seemed to have strayed even more from the original concept. I guess that's where a line like Monster High has its limitations. There's only so many monster-type characters you can work with and be appealing to its targeted audience. But that probably didn't work out too well, since the line was seeing a drop in sales that year. But to make up for that, in 2016, Mattel rebooted the line into something that the fans absolutely loved. The doll's design, as well as their fashion sense, started looking more simplistic and, dare I say, forgettable. To make even more changes, the brand's slogan went from the iconic "Freaky just got fabulous" to "How do you boo?" I'm still not sure what that's supposed to mean. And they're not as articulated as they used to be. It's a shame. There's a theory that one cause of this reboot are the infamous concerned parents. But in this case, I don't think this is 100% their fault. Like I said earlier, the brand sales were starting to drop in 2014. And you could say that Mattel just thought that changing the brand's image was going to solve that, particularly by selling towards a younger demographic, as well as getting approval from their parents. And with declining doll sales, Mattel would no longer have Disney toys on their side because of Ever After High. Disney was getting intimidated. After all, they're the ones that are known for the princess stuff. And they were about to release Descendants, which is pretty much the concept of Ever After High. Disney broke its ties with Mattel to have their toys marketed through Hasbro. And interestingly, the quality of their products dropped as well. But with Mattel losing Disney, they just didn't have the budget that they once had. 2016 marked the beginning of the end, and in 2018, Monster High was discontinued. Their reign in the doll world might have been short, but they definitely weren't forgotten. In the 2020s, there were some collector edition dolls that were made in reference to Gremlins, Child's Play, Beetlejuice, Wednesday, and some Stephen King works, but that's about it. But this Pennywise girl seems to be in high demand, so good for her. It wouldn't be until 2022 when the dolls officially came back to promote their live-action musical movie. This movie was made by Nickelodeon and detours away from the original storyline to where some in the Monster High community don't see this film as canon. Considering this is a musical, the songs here just didn't have the punch it once had. But around the same time of the movie's release, there was a Monster High TV show, which is currently still running. There was a live-action sequel made in 2023, and to be honest, I didn't know this existed until I did research for this video. While some fans enjoyed these movies and the relaunch of the brand, others felt that the revitalization of Monster High was forced and made in a hurry. Not to mention that some argued that these new dolls were too overpriced for what appears to be a cheaply made product. It seems that Mattel is still trying to appeal to the same demographic they had in the early 2010s. In my opinion, the third generation could have been a lot better if it grew alongside with the fans. I think the Bratz relaunch did this a lot better. Adult doll collectors are becoming more common, and their branding has quite a few references to media that definitely isn't made for kids. MJ knew that people grew up with these dolls and knew how to still appeal to them in the 2020s. I think that Monster High could benefit by leaning more into their dark roots, and maybe even reference something like famous movie slashers. I know these properties aren't in the public domain, but still. Like, a Freddy Krueger doll could have this cool ripped up look, and a Ghostface doll could have a cute hooded outfit with a cloak. It would be iconic. Personally, it's difficult for me to say the role of fashion dolls in the 2020s. There are the Mermaids and Rainbow High, but I'm just not seeing the same excitement for them like how previous dolls had. But Monster High was a one-of-the-kind brand of fashion dolls because they were some of the biggest risk takers. They utilized themes of fantasy and horror, while also having a clothing style heavily based on alternative subcultures. In the microgenre of wearing outfits inspired by doll brands, Monster High style fits are seen as one of the most fun to recreate due to their versatility. Along with portraying different species as cool and stylish, the characters had detailed, unique backstories where fans can have fun with world building, which is pretty much how you develop a fan base. Pretty much all fashion dolls have a message of be yourself, but Monster High went beyond that to where it conveyed to viewers that flaws are okay and can be embraced. I'm not 100% sure if a theatrical Monster High movie would have the same budget and blockbuster production like Barbie had, but if it's happening to Polly Pocket, it may as well happen a third time. But ideally, they'd be a bit more faithful to the original story and really lean into the campiness of it all. And that's all I have for the legendary doll line of Monster High. And in the festive spirit, what do you plan on going for Halloween? Thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you all in the next one. Bye!